All right, welcome back. Today, we're diving into a paradox that is just baffling. It defines our cities. You see it everywhere, this desperate need for housing, right? But at the exact same time, there are literally millions of homes just sitting there, completely empty. It's this bizarre crisis of emptiness, and we're going to figure out exactly why it's happening. I mean, this is the question, isn't it? It just seems to fly in the face of all logic. How can you possibly have record-breaking homelessness and a record number of empty homes at the very same moment? It doesn't make sense. So to get to the bottom of this, we're going to have to look at two very different places that are, believe it or not, telling the exact same global story.
So on one hand, you've got China's so-called ghost cities. You've probably seen pictures of them. These vast, brand new apartment blocks, totally built out, but eerily silent. They're built for millions, but hardly anyone lives there. It's almost like a premeditative surplus of housing. Then you flip the coin. You look at the West, cities like London, New York, and you see these sleek, luxury towers. But at night, entire floors are dark. They're lights-out towers. And right down on the street below, a brutal crisis of affordability and homelessness is unfolding. Now, you might think these two things are totally separate issues, but they're not. They are both symptoms of the same deep structural problem. The source material we're looking at calls it the Great Disconnect. And what that means is it's the point where housing just stops being about shelter for people and transforms into something else entirely. And that is the key clue we're going to follow in this investigation. Okay, first stop on our investigation, China. We're going to dive into how a state-driven system can and does intentionally create millions upon millions of empty homes. Get ready for this number, because the scale here is just mind-blowing. We are talking about an estimated 65 million vacant homes across China. That's a vacancy rate of around 22%. To put that in perspective, that is the highest in the entire world. But here's the kicker, the really crucial part. These aren't just newly built condos that developers haven't sold yet. No. Most of these are apartments that people have already bought. They're owned, but nobody's living in them. So why on earth would that happen? Well, it all boils down to this very unique political and economic engine that's running in the background. See, local governments there make a huge chunk of their money by selling land rights to developers. So they have this massive incentive to just keep selling and building. They even create these special entities to rack up huge debt to finance more and more construction. Why? Because these massive building projects pump up the local GDP numbers. And for an official, a bigger GDP number often means a promotion. Then you've got the other side of the equation, regular people. They don't have a ton of other places to safely invest their money, so they pour their savings into property, buying second or third apartments, not to live in, but as a store of value. Kind of like a piggy bank they hope will get fatter. And this chart really drives home just how hooked local governments are on this whole cycle. I mean, at its peak, selling off land rights made up a full 30% of their income. We're talking 8.7 trillion yuan. So you can see, the real incentive isn't to solve a housing shortage. It's just to keep the construction machine running, to keep that money flowing in. So here's the big takeaway from our first case file. China's ghost cities, they're not an accident. They're not some kind of market miscalculation. They are the calculated, deliberate result of a system that's designed to do one thing, produce economic units, to generate revenue and boost GDP. In this system, the empty apartment isn't a bug. It's the entire point. It's the feature. Okay, let's pack our bags and shift our investigation over to the West. Because here, in places like London and New York, the story is different. The emptiness we see isn't being driven by the state. It's being driven by the global market. The key behavior we see here has a name, buy to leave. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Wealthy investors buy up high-end property with absolutely no intention of ever living in it or even renting it out. They're just buying a secure place to park their cash and watch it appreciate in value. The source material calls them safe deposit boxes in the sky, and honestly, that's the perfect description. And the amount of money just locked away in these empty boxes, it's staggering. Take London, for example. There are about 30,000 long-term empty homes there. Their collective value, a cool £20 billion. That's a massive portion of the city's housing stock, just sitting there, completely unused. Now hold that number, £20 billion in empty homes, in your head, and contrast it with this.
In New York City during the last school year, 1 out of every 7 public school students experienced homelessness. That is over 154,000 children. The disconnect between that empty wealth and this human cost is it's devastating.
So who exactly owns all these empty places? Well, the data from London is pretty revealing. 42% of homes owned by foreign investors just sit empty. And it gets even more extreme at the high end. If you look at properties worth over £5 million, a whopping 64% are underused. So yeah, this isn't about your average homeowner. This is about huge pools of global capital. And right here, this is the absolute key to understanding the paradox in the West. These empty, lights-out luxury apartments, they're not really participating in the local housing market that you or I live in. No, they're part of a totally separate global asset market. Their price isn't determined by what a local teacher or firefighter can afford. It's set by what a billionaire investor in another country is willing to pay. And that is exactly why having all these empty units does absolutely nothing to bring down prices for everybody else. They're playing a different game.
Okay, so we've looked at 2 very different systems, right? A state-driven one in China and a market-driven one in the West. And yet, they both lead to the same outcome: tons of empty homes and a major social crisis. So now it's time to connect the dots. Let's pull back the curtain and reveal the invisible architecture that actually links both of these situations.
And this underlying culprit, it has a name. It's called the financialization of housing. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is simple. It's the process of transforming housing from what it should be, a social good, a place for shelter, into just another commodity, a financial instrument like a share of stock or a bar of gold, where its value is judged not by the shelter it provides, but by the return on investment it can generate. You know, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Housing, Leilani Farha, put it perfectly. She said, there's a huge difference between housing as a commodity and gold as a commodity. Gold is not a human right, housing is. And that quote just cuts right to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? We've somehow started treating a fundamental human need as if it were just another luxury good. So how exactly does this financialization happen? You can basically break it down into 3 steps. First, you get these unimaginable tidal waves of global capital. We're talking over $163 trillion flooding into real estate because it's seen as a safe bet. Second, all that money pouring in makes prices just decouple from what local people actually earn. They're not connected anymore. And the final step, the home is no longer seen as shelter. It's now a speculative asset. It's become a poker chip in a giant global casino. And this table really just lays it all out, side by side. It doesn't matter if the main players are local governments in China or global investors in London and New York. And it doesn't matter if their motivation is boosting GDP or just preserving their wealth. The social outcome is the same. It's a disaster. On one side, you get mountains of wasted resources. On the other, you get mass homelessness and crushing inequality. It's 2 totally different roads leading to the exact same broken destination. So, after looking at all the evidence from both of our case files, we've kind of reached the verdict, haven't we? What we're really facing here is a fundamental, almost philosophical choice about what a home is actually for. So, is there a way out of this mess? What can actually be done? Well, the folks who study this point to a few main ideas. First, you have to curb the speculation. That means things like implementing really aggressive taxes on vacant homes, make it expensive to just let a property sit empty. Second, you need radical transparency. You have to close all the loopholes that let people use shell companies and trusts to own property anonymously. We need to know who owns what. And third, and this is a big one, you have to actively decommodify housing. That means pouring money into non-market solutions, things like social housing, community land trusts, and cooperatives that are taken out of the speculative market for good. And all of this brings us to one final powerful question. It's the question that sits right at the very foundation of this whole crisis. Because as obvious as the answer might seem to you or me, our global economic system seems to be choosing financial asset more and more every day. So the real question isn't just what the right answer is. The real question is, what choice are we going to make?